What's up, everybody? I'm Jason, and welcome back to some more, well, this is not going to be a tip or a trick for the EOS R5, but it is going to be talking about the EOS R5. So this is going to be, for the time being, the last video talking about networking on the R5, and it's not a positive thing because I'm not going to be telling you how to do anything. Instead, I'm going to be wrapping up the network session or section of this series prematurely because I can't get things to work. So in this video, what I want to talk about briefly are the things that I've had problems with that have been failures that I cannot make work. Now, I want to stress all of my testing, everything that I've done with this camera has been running on firmware version 1.6. Things may have worked in earlier firmware versions. Things may work again in a future firmware version. Everything that I have run into has definitely been a software related, or most of the things I should say that I have run into have definitely been software related problems, specifically low level networking stuff that I cannot make the camera conclude or complete the TCP handshake, which prevents it from being able to do anything higher level. So FTP, Image.Canon, whatever. Now, this was going to be a video talking about Canon's Image.Canon service and how to use it with your camera, except I can't make it work. So instead, I'm going to cover briefly the problems that I've had, what I've done, how I plan to go forward with this, and what I plan to do about things. So what has failed? Well, I've already done a very comprehensive video on connecting to FTP, or the problems related to connecting to FTP. And in short, I cannot connect to an FTP server outside of my local network. So if it's not on the same subnet as my computer or my camera, the camera completely refuses to connect to it. And in that video, I showed packet captures that I was seeing that the TCP handshake, which is the most fundamental level of networking protocol that the camera uses, simply would not be completed. The camera would not accept or deal with or process the packet coming back to the camera from an IP address that was outside of the local subnet. Now, the FTP, that ultimately resulted in a long timeout and the camera erroring out with a code 40. So I was asked if I would be looking into Image.Canon, and I debated Image.Canon a whole lot because almost all of this network stuff is not stuff that I really use. It's not a core part of my function with the camera. And I was hesitant to wanting to even cover Image.Canon because it requires another account, it's more stuff to set up, etc., etc. But I was asked, and I had been debating whether or not I wanted to get into Image.Canon simply from a point of completeness. Obviously, I've talked about everything else on the camera with the exception of pairing a wireless remote or a Bluetooth remote. Why not talk about Image.Canon? Compounding that, of course, was the problems that I had with FTP. FTP would not work outside the network, and Image.Canon is a service that's purely outside of my network. It's completely in the cloud, Canon services or servers, etc. And I wanted to see if Canon's Image.Canon would work if the camera could connect to it. So that would point to whether or not there was a problem with FTP specifically, or if there was a problem with the fundamental networking capabilities of the R5 running firmware version 1.6 as a whole. Well, it turns out that doesn't work. Connecting or trying to connect to Image.Canon errors out with a code 125. Now, I wasn't going to get into doing a whole bunch of TCP packet analysis and whatnot, but I realized it's actually really simple for me to do that since I already had the stuff for doing it the last time. So I did the same thing I did with FTP. I connected to my router. I grabbed a packet capture of everything coming from my camera since I know the IP address that my router will assign the camera, and I looked at what was happening. And the same problem that I had with FTP is exactly what was happening here. The camera would make an outgoing network connection to beyond my network. The server, Canon's server, would respond with the response that it was supposed to. So the second packet literally in the TCP handshake. And at that point, my camera would completely just ignore anything that was coming back in. Now, as a note, the network or the error codes were different. I got an error code 125 on with Image.Canon. I got an error code 40 with FTP, but the fundamental problem of what's going on is identical between the two. Now, with that said, I have tried some troubleshooting that I could do locally. I have reset the networking on my camera, figuring maybe somewhere along the lines I set something up or changed a setting somewhere that was causing this problem. So I reset the camera's networking settings. I wasn't going to reset the camera as a whole. There's way too much customization going on that for me to want to redo all of that. It didn't help. Now, I wasn't too hopeful that it was going to help because this doesn't seem like it should, or this isn't something that should be affected by camera settings. This is more fundamental in the camera's network stack for processing packets and dealing with that stuff, but I had to try it. The next thing I tried was doing the same thing, so trying to connect to the same services using my R5C in photo mode. I have never done anything network related on my R5C. I have never set up even a Bluetooth phone or whatnot, a smart device to connect to that camera for, say, GPS coding or tagging images. So it is should have been or should be a completely pristine network system as far as the camera is concerned. Now obviously photo mode on the R5C is based on the same firmware the R5 is. I think it's hard to tell because the R5C's firmwares are cinema firmware and they don't tell you what the relevant photo firmware is, but it's somewhere between firmware's version 1.5 and 1.6 or something to that effect. Neither of those troubleshooting methods have worked. So it's a software problem in the camera that Canon will have to fix. So with that said, where am I going with this? Well, I have made the decision to stop trying to mess with this. I wanted to do a video on Image.Canon and what to do and how to use it and so on and so forth. If I can get this, if Canon resolves this problem eventually, I will come back and revisit that and make it work. I am currently debating whether or not I want to go talk to Canon about these issues. I probably will, maybe, I don't know. I'm up in the air on it. A big part of the problem here is this is stuff that it doesn't fundamentally work, or it's not something I fundamentally use. I do use some of the network stuff for like tethered shooting, but it's all on my local network. That said, I have an awful lot of data and testing on this that shows where the problem seems to be, that I think it's maybe important to get to Canon for Canon to be able to do something about this. But the short of it is I'm also kind of burnt out on dealing with this because of the problems that I've been having. So I probably, maybe, I don't know, we'll talk to Canon about this eventually. It's not something that's high on my priority list. It's also very hard for me to get motivated to deal with the support situation and support people and so on and so forth, with this being a non-critical part of the camera for me. Now, I know there's probably some of you out there who see this as a major issue. By all means, if you are not or if you cannot connect to an FTP server outside of your network, or you cannot connect to Image.Canon on your R5, and you're getting the same errors that I talked about in this video, please talk to Canon. The more people that report the problem to Canon, the more likely it is that Canon fixes it. Additionally, if you are using this or you've had a problem with this, let me know in the comments whether it works for you or not. If it works for you, let me know what firmware version you're using, whether or not you're using IPv4 only or IPv4 and IPv6 with your wireless network. The more information that you can put without, giving me like what server you're connecting to. I don't need to know that or anything like that, but enough, the more information about camera settings that you can put, the better, easier it will be for me to track down this problem. Now, in any event, that's the current situation. I'm going to move on to talk about some more camera stuff. I'm not done with the R5 tips and tricks video series at all. I'm going to start getting into video very shortly with them, so the video side of things. I'm also going to be starting to talk more about the R5C and the video stuff on that. I have a whole bunch of stuff planned out, but I wanted to put an update out about what was going on with the R5 networking stuff and Canon's Image.Canon and service from the R5 and the situation that I have kind of run into. So if this was useful, let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. As I said, please comment if you have problems with using Image.Canon or connecting to an FTP server outside of your local network. Or if you don't, if it works for you, let me know. Please provide as much information as you're comfortable providing with respect to, like I said, camera firmware version is very helpful. The rest of the stuff, you know, that's kind of the big thing, is I need to know what firmware version you're running and what camera it is, because I know that some of this stuff does work for the R6, but doesn't necessarily work, as I've seen, on the R5. So as I said, if you found this useful, let me know by hitting that like button. If this kind of thing seems like it might be your kind of thing, please consider subscribing if you're not already. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.